Good afternoon. This webinar offers closed captioning. Welcome to the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection free business education webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/ChicagoBACP. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. All BACP webinars are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, which is a free program for anyone interested in starting or growing a business in Chicago. Getting your certificate is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, register for the program. 2, attend 6 webinars in 6 months. And 3, graduate to get your certificate. Graduating makes you eligible to apply for CIBC Bank's Entrepreneurial Loan Program. Note that you must already be registered for the program to get credit for attending today's webinar. For details, visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are those for the presenter and are not the official policy or position of the City of Chicago or BACP. The information mentioned will be posted in the chat box. Today's webinar will be Transform Your Dream into a Real Startup, presented by SCORE Chicago. Turn it over to SCORE.
Thank you, Jerry. I want to say good afternoon to all of you who are with us today. We really appreciate your joining us on this nice spring day in Chicago. I'm here to introduce SCORE and our presenter today, SCORE volunteer Jeff Nicholson. SCORE, in case you don't know about us, we're a national organization. We're affiliated as a partner to the U.S. Small Business Administration, and our mission is to help small businesses and those who want to become small businesses, aspiring entrepreneurs, get off the ground and succeed. We've been doing this for 60 years. We have over 10,000 volunteers like Jeff and myself around the country. Last year, we helped start close to 59,000 new businesses. We helped create over 140,000 jobs for owners and employees that they brought on. So that's the impact that we have across the country. We provide mentoring and we provide education. And this is an example of the free services, the education we provide. But if you like the content of these webinars, there are more to come. There's also the opportunity to sign up for a free and confidential mentor from SCORE Chicago, somebody like Jeff or myself. So with that said, let me introduce Jeff. He's been a mentor with SCORE Chicago for more than 10 years, but he has a career of more than 30 years in commercial and investment banking. He's taught management and finance at the university level. With SCORE, he has headed up our consulting group, helping businesses really solve problems, businesses that are already somewhat established. But he's here today to speak, as you can see on the subject, transforming your dream into a real startup. I've seen this presentation before. It's loaded with information and resources. You will get a copy of the presentation after it's completed. We'll handle any questions you might have at the end of the presentation. And please do consider signing up for a mentor to really take your learning forward and move the process along your entrepreneurial journey. So with that said, I will turn it over to today's presenter, Jeff Nicholson. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for all those kind words. I want to thank you for participating in this webinar on how to transform your dream into a real business. I'm going to be your guide today, and I very much appreciate everybody who's listening in. Let's start with this quote. Entrepreneurship is like eating glass and staring into the abyss of death. Well, this quote was made by someone who was once famous for borrowing money from his friends to pay his rent. But he's also famous as a co-founder of PayPal, of Tesla, and of SpaceX. Yeah, we're talking about Elon Musk. This is a guy who went from famine to feast So he really knows this journey well. And this is what he thinks about entrepreneurship. We're here today to learn a little bit more about how to start a business. We're going to cover a lot of ground, an inch deep and a mile wide. So please fasten your seatbelts. Many of you are here today because you want to know if you have what it takes to become a successful entrepreneur. Well, in my judgment, you're leaning in the right direction if you are very restless, if this is the only thing you think about, if you are beyond determined, if you take criticism as motivation, if you aren't broke, and if you can cope well with stress. Because if you actually make it, it's a very exclusive club. As you can see, it's estimated that only 6% of the adult population owns a business as their main job. But the downside of being exclusive is a potential disconnect with family and friends. Many won't understand what you're doing, nor will they be able to relate to the problems you face. The demands for your time will never seem to stop growing. There's always more you could be doing. There's always a project, an event, a meeting, or a phone call. Why? Because in the end, it's you, and it's only you. You are accountable. That's your job, after all. But most of your family and friends just won't get it. And here's another fact often not discussed. Of the roughly 33 million small businesses in America, over 80% are one-employee businesses. And that percentage has obviously been growing with web-based businesses being launched over the last 10 years. But being in business all by yourself can be a very lonely proposition. So you can't let loneliness burn you out. So you need to make time for family and friends. You actually need to put it on your calendar, for heaven's sakes. You should also find a hobby as an outlet. And I really think it's important to find out when your chill out time is during the day, because that you want to take advantage of. You want to build a network for yourself, don't you? Find a mentor. Someone at SCORE will be helpful, but find other entrepreneurs to interact with. It's at this point you should also start thinking about a co-founder or a partner. Consider using co-working spaces instead of just being isolated at home. I know it might cost some money, but it might be well worth the effort. And you can find online networking groups to participate in. You can join, or you could start a mastermind group on the internet and use that as a sounding board for issues that you're facing all the time. Remember that self-worth is not the same as net worth. Now, this chart is no joke. This picture was drawn by an aspiring entrepreneur to help his family get a sense of what he was going through. They couldn't figure it out. So he did this. There will be emotional turbulence. And I'm talking about bouts of severe anxiety and stress. Because you'll have to juggle many roles as an entrepreneur, from being a salesperson to fulfillment manager to treasurer, and you're going to face countless setbacks. Founders rarely talk about it, but many fake it until they make it. They struggle silently, but the hiding makes the whole thing worse. This roller coaster is going to tempt you to neglect your health, to stop exercising, to not worry about getting enough sleep. Passion is a big driver for success, but it also can consume you if you're not very careful. Now, that's a snapshot of what's ahead. You should know that you're in a great state to be thinking about starting a business. Now, Looka is a logo design and brand platform business for entrepreneurs, and they did this survey. And ranked the top 5 states in the country for starting new businesses. And those were the 6 criteria that they used in order to make that judgment. Now, California had the highest number of businesses with fewer than 5 employees. So that really catapulted them to the top. And they also had the best survival rate. And that might be due to Silicon Valley, I'm not sure. Texas is decidedly a business-friendly climate, and Austin attracts legions of entrepreneurs. So that probably helped drive them. Illinois was number 4. Now, certainly it's a lot more affordable than either of the coasts, talking about New Jersey or California. But the Chicago startup ecosystem is pretty vibrant. And by the way, Illinois is the only Midwestern state in the top 10, according to this survey. So do you have what it takes to capitalize on this? You know, we're going to talk about the most important traits of a successful entrepreneur. Is it being confident, organized, a self-starter, creative? Well, the conventional wisdom among most observers, myself included, is that passion is the #1 characteristic of startup entrepreneurs. Well, back in 2009, the Founders Institute was created, and it's the largest boot camp for startups in the country. They have launched over 4,000 businesses across 185 cities, including Chicago. But in order to get in, you have to take a pre-admissions test to determine whether you have what the Institute feels a successful entrepreneur must have. And you have to pass the test to get in. What are the 4 traits they're looking for? They're listed there. Emotional stability, having high impulse control and can remain calm under stress. Fluid intelligence is important. And that really is about learning new rules that you can apply to solve existing problems. Openness, that's all about being creative, being curious, challenging norms, and appreciating things that are around you. That's openness. And agreeableness measures cooperation versus antagonism. Overall, a willingness to collaborate with others. Well, the Founders Institute believes that they have a lock on the DNA of successful entrepreneurs. It's funny because the same time that the Founders Institute was being started, a venture capitalist and a couple of venture capitalists and a McKinsey consultant tested 500 successful entrepreneurs to find out what made them tick. Now, I'll tell you that when they said successful, what they mean is that the entrepreneur either sold the business or took it public. So it's a pretty high bar. But they looked at 500 successful entrepreneurs and they came up with the 4 traits that existed in each entrepreneur. And one tends to be dominant and one is secondary. And the first one is heart. Heart dominance is about passion, about sacrifice, about an unshakable sense of purpose. That was dominant in 65% of those successful entrepreneurs. Smarts is about being rational, fact-driven, focusing on processes, on setting goals, and holding people accountable. Guts is about taking action with conviction, being risk tolerant rather than a risk seeker, and having a fire in your belly to succeed. Remember, this is a marathon and not a sprint. So that's about guts. And luck is not about gambling. It's about having a positive attitude, a curiosity to create your own luck. And when it happens, an ability to seize the moment and take advantage of it. That was dominant in 25% of those successful entrepreneurs. Now, Heart, Smarts, Guts, and Luck was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller. I highly recommend you buy it and get it on Amazon because it's a great self-awareness guide. You can read this and then kind of make your own self-assessment about, do you have what it takes? Now, you can go on the internet and find countless examples of what a successful entrepreneur should look like. I've just given you what I think are the best examples. But let's turn to a little reality here. This is a chart about businesses between 2006 and 2015. And what it shows is after 2 years, 33% of businesses that start fail. That's the average. And I'll tell you that, interestingly enough, 36% of small businesses don't have a website. Now, there might be some analysis there. Now, after 2 more years, another 13% of those startups fail. So after 4 years, 46% of startups are gone. And after 7 years, only 2 out of every 5 startups survive. 3 out of 5 fail. Now, there's a lot of noise in these numbers. Lots of industries are collapsed into all this to make a summary statement. So franchisees, for example, have a 75 to 80% success rate. That's buried in these numbers as well. But that gives you some understanding of the success. Now, I want you to really focus on this chart. On the far left-hand side, those are percentages of businesses. So at the top, 100% start. At the bottom, you've got the list of years going out. So 100% of the businesses start in year 1. And then as you go out, that's the number of businesses that survive. And this is from 1994 through 2015. And it's based on actual data. But look at the number. Look at the slope of those graphs. It doesn't matter whether the economy is in a growth spurt or a recession. The track record of successful startup companies has followed a surprisingly consistent pattern over the past 20 years. Now, the 2-year survival rate for startups since 2015, which isn't shown on this, that averages 69% compared to 67% for the last 20 years. So it's not statistically significant. Our mission, and yours, is to help you become one of the 2 out of 5 successful companies after 7 years. Because if you make it that far, the chances for longer-term survival are particularly favorable. So what do you think are the main causes of startup failures? Well, Inc. magazine went to its 500 founders. Those are the 500 fastest growing privately held companies in America, and asked them, think back to your first year in business and identify what you think was your biggest challenge or biggest mistake. And the number one answer was, by 45%, almost half, said a shortage of capital. Notice a distant second, a bad fit with other key employees, only 16%. If you looked at the whole list, it was very granular, a lot of different reasons, but the number one clearly was a shortage of capital. Now, you may not have heard of Y Combinator, but these are 2 organizations that I follow closely: Y Combinator in California, which is an accelerator, and Entrepreneur Magazine, which is a great publication. Now, Y Combinator, they provide some seed money, and they really help out with launching businesses. For example, they launched Airbnb and DoorDash as an example. And here's what they say are the 4 most distinctive reasons startups fail. Number 1, it's a surprising number of founders that assume that someone, they're not exactly sure who, will want to buy whatever they're building. They don't have a specific customer in mind. Being half-hearted is another issue. Most founders of failed startups don't quit their day jobs. Most founders of successful ones do. Next one, few major, I underline major, startups are founded by just one person. There's usually two or three. And finally, most successful startups end up doing something different than originally intended. Failed ones tend to be stubborn about sticking with their original idea. Now you jump to Entrepreneur Magazine, which I'll talk about a little later too. But some founders want to be in the business so badly that they don't do the work up front that's needed. They fail to research their business idea to see if it's viable. Underestimating the financial requirements or their timing is another problem. And that includes focusing too much on sales and not on profitability. Working in the business rather than on the business. I mean, let's face it, when you're a single employee business, you're firefighting things every day. And so you've got to worry about the fulfillment. You got to worry about your website. You got to worry about this. And that's being in the business, all day long. But you're not working on it. You're not thinking about your competition. You're not thinking about your next strategic supplier. You're not thinking about your next fulfillment operation. Those are the things that you work on the business. And you have to plan on your calendar to put that in your day. Otherwise, you're just going to get buried in the business. And lastly, miscalculating market size, timing, potential market share, all that. Success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. Now, believe it or not, the guy who made this quote was Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 1940 to 45. Now, we think of him as being, kind of helping to cure the World War II, but prior to that, for 10 years, Churchill was in public service, but he was peppered with lost elections and being part of political parties who were losers. And so that wilderness time from 29 to 39 is what a lot of people aren't familiar with. But he knew what it was like to go from one failure to another and eventually became prime minister. Now, the point of all this on failing is not to scare you. It's not. It's to help you avoid stepping on landmines. We want to assist you to navigate the choppy waters better and increase your chances of being the 2 out of the 5 that survive. Now, with that in mind, I think startup failure is about not making something or not providing a service that enough people want or need. Period. Very simple. Paul Graham, who was co-founder of that Y Combinator we talked about earlier, this is his quote. The very best startup ideas have 3 things in common. 1, there's something the founders themselves want. 2, that they themselves can build. And 3, that few others realize are worth doing. So now think about your own startup idea. How do you know whether it has real potential? Well, I start by trying to answer these 3 questions. Does my idea solve a problem or create an opportunity? Who is my target market? And what value does my idea deliver to the target audience? Answering these questions objectively, underline objectively, will unlock the potential of your dream. But objectivity is key. Your assumptions going into this journey might indeed be wrong. And you need to recognize that your opinion is actually irrelevant. You must learn to answer these three central questions with facts from the marketplace. Market research is essential for startups. Understanding the needs and wants of your target market will be the difference between success and failure. For too many startups, it can take years to find the right fit in the market. And it's often during that time of searching that you fail to get traction in the marketplace, you start to run out of cash. You can't afford a slow pace entry into the marketplace. You need to use market research to gather information to answer those three questions on the previous slide objectively. And that work has to be done up front to validate that your idea can find traction and eventually succeed. Now, market research can be qualitative, it can be quantitative, and we're going to talk about some examples here. But before you start your research, you have to decide, well, what is it that you're looking for? You need to discover something in the marketplace to give you confidence in what you're doing. And one way to start is to create a business hypothesis. Now, this is an example of Apple's iPod hypothesis. People will pay to download music to listen to in public. Now, there's three assumptions built into that. B, the download music, that was validated already by Napster. Millions of people, myself included, downloaded music from the internet. Also, listening in public, that was also validated by Walkman, Discman, all that stuff was already in existence. The only thing that was needed for research purposes was assumption A. That was the risky assumption. Will people pay? And that's where Apple spent their money. Obviously, you know the answers. So you need to get out of the building and listen to the marketplace. And I strongly urge you to begin by doing some problem or discovery interviews. You should be talking with 10 to 20 people about that. You can start with family and friends. That's okay. Some people say no. I think that's fine. But you need to recognize you just can't stop there. So you interview 10 to 20 people to discover how they currently deal with what your startup deal hopes to remedy or fix or improve. So you ask questions and listen to their answers. So you ask, how are you solving this problem today? What's frustrating to you about how it's being solved? Where does solving this problem fit on your priority list? And if you solve the issue, how would things be better for you? Explain that. So you want to learn whatever you can from these interviews. So you have to listen intently, but you have to avoid trying to sell them on your idea. You're not trying to sell them on anything. You're trying to learn how they solve problems in the area where your business is going to hopefully succeed. Now, if after you visit with 20 people, you discover that this is an important factor for them, they're having trouble solving this issue, now you go to the solution interviews. And you should talk to a different set of 10 to 20 people. And here, again, the goal is to listen, not to sell. So you tell them what the problem is, and then you provide them your solution at a high level. You could state maybe what your solution doesn't do, and you could suggest some pricing that's going to be potentially included with what you're trying to sell. But you're not trying to sell what the product is. You want to gauge their willingness to buy. So once you've presented the problem, given your solution, you want to listen to the kinds of things that they say to give you a sense of whether or not they're willing to pay for this thing. And that's where you might use a minimum viable product or a prototype during these interviews, because it's something that they can handle and touch and see, or show a video of something. That's another example. But these initial sets of interviews are a must, in my opinion. Now, actual market research, primary market research is very expensive, and it's normally reserved for businesses that have been around for a long time, larger ones too. But online surveys have become a great vehicle to collect marketplace feedback. Now, a survey tool platform is digital software that enables you to make and send a multitude of surveys out into the marketplace to get feedback. Now, you're provided by companies like these with templates and sample questions. The platforms collect the answers from the respondents, and they provide you report filters. So they'll give you analysis, they'll give you charts and graphs, and they'll also allow you to create what they call skipping logic. I forgot. Skipping logic, which is where if you answer no, then you skip a couple of questions and go to another thing. So they give you all of those software tools in the platforms to build your survey. And these are 10 reputable survey platforms today, most of which have very low cost and even some free options to dip your toe into the marketplace. So you should really check out those websites. Now, most of those platforms, they charge $25 a month or less for their basic service. And I think the most expensive one was $60 a month. So it's very cost effective. You get results in real time as people complete the surveys, and the respondents can complete it on their own time in private, which I think fosters a lot more objectivity than having face-to-face interviews. And the surveys could be made anonymous too if you don't want them to know who you are, what your company name is. So if you have a ready-made list of people that you'd like to get responses from, these platforms allow you to easily import those addresses or email addresses or whatever into the platform to send out. Now, if you don't have anybody in mind, some of the platforms offer a direct link to a number of social media platforms. So you could use your own social media page to interact with people to take the survey. And some of those platforms also include links to access panels, which you can use as a resource for respondents if you don't have access to anyone else. Now, these are some of the market research panel companies in the US. A market research panel is they put together a group of recruited respondents who have agreed to take a part of market research or surveys and give feedback to companies. They usually have shared a lot of information about themselves, how they make decisions, what their characteristics are, and somehow they're either paid or rewarded in some way, shape, or form. Now, I've highlighted with a red arrow AYTM, and that stands for Ask Your Target Market. And AYTM is a survey tool and a research panel company. So it manages over 60 million respondents worldwide. They use 10 different demographics like age, ethnicity, education, and that. But they also classify respondents across 2,000 different psychographics, like lifestyles, what your interests are, what your decision criteria are for certain things. Now, assume for the moment, just to make this come alive for you, assume for the moment that you've got 10 questions that you would like answered. And let's say you want to get 400 completed surveys about your startup idea. Now, to get 400 responses randomly from the complete panel of universe without any demographic choices, that will cost you about $700. That's about $1.75 a questionnaire. Now, if you wanted to get 400 completed surveys from single women between 25 and 45 who work part-time with income between 25 and 50 grand a year, that would still cost you only $700 to get 400 responses. But it's going to take longer because they've got to go through and weed out the ones that aren't part of your qualifying list. Now, if you wanted to go the next step and you wanted to narrow the panel by 3 demographics like dog owner, plays video games, and is a Walmart shopper, let's say those 3, that cost really goes up. It's about $4,900, about $700 more. The point of all of this, however, is that it's worth checking out these platform companies that provide the questionnaires and provide the respondents, because that's how you can get a great deal of information from the marketplace about what you're planning to do. Validating your idea with market research prevents failure. There's nothing more wasteful than brilliantly engineering a product that doesn't sell. When you create something that nobody wants, does it matter that you did it on time or you did it within a great design or under budget? Remember, people don't buy your product or service. They buy what your product or service can do for them. And that's where the research helps. Now, let's switch gears a bit. Let's assume that you've done some research and you believe you've identified your target market and you validated that your product will get some traction in the marketplace. Well, I kind of start out with marketing. That's the thing that will help you identify potentially what the potential of your business is. And to me, marketing is answering 2 questions. What are the characteristics of your target customers and why do they buy? Answering those questions will help you determine what your potential is. So several years ago, an entrepreneur came into SCORE Chicago and said he was in the business of selling proprietary handmade Cuban cigars to African Americans in the US. And he had a great story. His father had grown up in Cuba. He was born in Cuba and had worked for 3 of the largest manufacturers of cigars in Cuba that rolled their own cigars. So I thought, okay, this guy's got a really interesting story. It's got a father that has some access. And so it was really good. So his website was up and running. And he initially came in to see if he had enough inventory. He said, I've got 300 boxes of handmade cigars. And I went and I bought a list of 8,000 names of affluent African Americans. It cost me $3,500, but I bought this list from a market research firm. And I said, well, this is great. You know, can I look at your business plan? He says, well, I don't have a written business plan. And I said, okay, so you're here to see if you have enough inventory. How much have you sold so far? And he said, well, I haven't sold anything. So I've got these names, but I'm afraid to reach out to those people if I don't have enough inventory. I don't want to lose sales because I reached out. So I said, okay, let me do some digging. And then we met another time. So I did this in about less than an hour using Google. I went to the Census Bureau and found out that at the time, there were 30 million adult African Americans in the US. And the CDC reported that 7.7 of adult African Americans smoke cigars. World Tobacco said the large cigars have a 49% market share, and machine versus hand rolled was a 50-50 split. And the Cigar Association of America said the average cigar consumption was 2 per week, or 104 per year. So when we got back together, I went through the math. And I said, okay, 30 million times 7.7, 49%, large, 50% hand rolled, 104 a year. In the US, African Americans will consume approximately 60 million cigars a year. So I said, listen, let's assume that over a period of a couple of years, you are able to capture an insignificant 0.5% of the market. That represents almost 300,000 cigars. And so that's 11,770 boxes annually, or $2.4 million in revenue. That's what your potential is at that small market share of 0.5%. Now recognize there's 25 cigars in a box. So he had an inventory of 300 boxes of cigars. So 7,500 cigars he's got in inventory. So I said, let's go to your names. Take the 8,000 names. 7.7% are cigar smokers, 49% large, 50% hand rolled, 104 a year. That's 15,700 cigars annually if you captured 100% of every cigar smoker in that list. You've got 750. They will buy 15,000 cigars, but that's if you capture every cigar smoker on that list, which you're not gonna. So I told you need to get out and sell cigars tomorrow, if not today. Now, I admit that this is a rather simplistic example. However, you have to be very focused on who your target market is, because if you're not, if you don't define it, you can't find out any of this kind of information. You've got to focus like a rifle, not with a shotgun. You can always expand your horizons, but you need to keep it narrowed to begin with in order to get the information you need to develop market potential. And this didn't even get at that second question, which is, why do you buy? Let's now jump from marketing to sales. This is just a list of things that I think are important to recognize. You know, you should always be selling. Not everybody's a salesman, but you should always be selling. You need to develop an elevator speech. And if you don't know what that is, that's a short, less than 30-second statement about yourself and your business that should stimulate some reaction from anyone. That's what an elevator speech is. And you need to get out there and network. You know, Woody Allen said about auditioning and getting parts, 80% of success is just showing up. So if you're not networking, you're not showing up, and you just need to do that. You also need to recognize that while you give an elevator speech, you need to shut up and listen after that. Any great sales training program will indicate that the salesperson should only be talking 25% of the time, and the customer or prospect should be talking 75%. Why? Because you want to find out that answer. Why do you buy? Why are you solving the problem this way? How important is solving that problem in your priority list? If you don't let them talk, you're not going to find that out. Give yourself permission to call. You know, a lot of people really don't like knocking on doors, but if you send a flyer or drop off a business card, then you can go back and it gives you permission, because I'm just following up on a card I dropped off, or a brochure I left, or an email that I sent. And start building your email list today. I mean, you really want to get a list of people that you can start networking with. They don't have to necessarily be customers. They could be supporters in other ways. They could be suppliers, but you need to start formulating that list, and you should start a blog and develop content. You know, if you think about your own buying choices today, how you do it, you do some research and you try to find, is this company and is this product credible? Is it reliable? Is this a company that's knowledgeable about what I need, the problems I'm trying to solve? That's all the stuff that you do today. And that's what people are looking for from you and your company in order to buy from you. So you can pay someone to curate information for your blog on your website. There's people that do that all the time. They can go to trade journals, they can go to newspapers, they can get information that's out there in the marketplace, they can send it to you, and then you could comment on that on your website. Once people see that you're commenting on things in your space, they're going to believe that you're credible, that you're reliable, and that you're knowledgeable. So developing content is really critical. And, today, online video represents about over 70% of all the traffic that's out there. So if you don't have videos on your website or YouTube, you probably don't exist in most people's minds. Well, let's talk about competition. As a senior banker, it never ceased to amaze me how little small businessmen knew about their competition. Whenever I met a new person, a new business for the first time, I'd always ask, tell me something about your competition. And 3 out of 4 times, the owner would say, well, I really don't have many competitors. And what's behind that is they thought to themselves, there isn't really many people out there that do exactly the same thing that I do. Well, I'm thinking to myself, well, if you don't have any competition, you must be minting money, right? Well, I think the reality is that most business owners do not take the time to examine competition. Now, they'll remember a competitor that they stumbled into, or maybe a prospect said, well, I got a quote from so-and-so, but they never take the time. And I found out that the most successful entrepreneurs and CEOs budget time on their calendar for examining competition. They make it part of their weekly schedule to do something to find out about competition. And so I think as a beginner, you should at least study 3 competitors in order to find out more about what's going on in the marketplace around you. Figure out what their pricing is, what their guarantees are, what their reviews are, what their shortcomings might be. That's really what you should be doing. But finding the list of competitors, I grant you, is not so easy. So you got to do some digging. So I would start by going to nasus.com, and they have 1,100 industry codes in their website. And each of those codes represents a business segment that has a specific description. And then there's drill down tools that you can use to get to the top 10 companies in that industry. And what the keywords are, you want to capture those in the description of the business, because you're going to take those keywords and then go to Google, or I would also suggest thomasnet.com is another place you can go, but you put those keywords in to find who are the parties out there on the web today that use those same keywords, and that gives you some indication of who your competitors are. And Thomasnet is kind of interesting because it's really built for companies that are looking to get bids from suppliers, for example. So they have their own set of names, of industry segments and whatever, but you can put something in. If they have something there that fits with your space, then you can also segment that search by geography. And you can get a list of people that are based in and around Chicago or in Illinois, for example, that are supplying the kinds of things that your business is going to be doing. And the other thing is to look at trade associations. Today there's somewhere between 25 and 30,000 trade associations in the US, and each of them are trying to promote a different industry segment. So when you go to their websites, you can see who is on the board and who they represent as companies. You can find out on how many members they have and who the members are. All of that gives you information that you can dig into the industry that you're getting into. Now, let me give you an example to make this come alive. Assume for the moment that your new business is the manufacturing of a new organic dog food. So you go to Nasus and you scroll to manufacturing, and you'll actually find dog and cat food manufacturing as a category. And so it has a description and it has a Nasus code. So when you click on the code, you'll see the description. It also shows the top 10 US manufacturers of cat and dog food. So each industry description, this is a little too simplistic for that, but each industry description has keywords that they use to describe it, and you take those keywords to go search on Google or Thomasnet. To find out more about the industry, you can click on any of those 10 companies and find out more about what they're doing and if they, for example, produce organic dog food or not. But it gives you at least a beginning of where you can get some keywords and you get an industry description. I found it very easy once I have the NACIS code and description to find out trade associations. All you have to do is go to Bing, I like Bing, go to Bing search and ask their AI Copilot for a list of US trade associations that represent dog and cat food manufacturers. Well, they had a list of 5. These were the 3 biggest ones. Now, some industries will have more trade associations and some will have only 1. But I selected the Pet Food Institute. And when I went to their website, I found they've got 22 members and they've got 24 associate members. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, but all you have to do is click on any of those icons and it takes you directly to their website where you can find out more about their dog food manufacturing operations. Now, this may appear to be a very simple example, but that said, discovering your meaningful competitors is one of the most useful yet avoided tasks by entrepreneurs. There's a wealth of information out there on your competitors. All you need to do is to begin to do the searching and find out that information. You must take the time to investigate and find out who your real and meaningful competitors are. This is really critical. And once you collect information on those competitors, SCORE will help you pull all that information together. So if you go to score.org, enter analyze your competition in the search bar, and this is what comes up. It's a free webinar on analyzing your competition, and the webinar will actually help you develop what they call a SWOT analysis, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a way to classify all the information you've gathered on your competitors, and it's geared to help with putting together your business plan because that will become an important part of it. All right, let's just stop for a minute to change gears a little bit. I know we've been going a mile a minute. I apologize, but that's the way it is. We're going to get into some details now about how you actually form the business and whatnot. So to start with, these are kind of the 4 major corporate structures. Sole proprietorship, which, believe it or not, 70% of new businesses, that's what they do. They set up a sole proprietorship. It's easy, fast, and inexpensive. If you have somebody else that you're working with, sometimes they'll set up a partnership. But you should know that a sole proprietorship or a partnership does not put a veil between your business and your personal assets. So if someone sues your business as a sole proprietorship, they can get access to your personal income, your house, your savings, whatever. And so my recommendation is stay away from sole proprietorships, stay away from partnerships, because they expose you and your personal assets to potential problems. So you should be thinking about a limited liability company, an LLC, or a C corporation, which is more conventional. Now, the interesting thing about the LLC is that they have members versus stockholders, but you can have as many members as you want, from 1 to God knows how many. The other interesting thing about an LLC is you can design your tax paying in any way, shape, or form you want. It could be a sole proprietor, it could be a partnership, a corporation, an S corp. Any tax plan is possible under an LLC. And also, you can take on another member without having them necessarily contribute capital to the business. So if you've got someone who's willing to do all your bookkeeping and you want to give them a 10% share of the business, you can do that with an LLC. With a C corporation, you can't. If they want 10% of the business, they're going to have to give you capital to buy 10% of the stock. But the problem with a C corporation is that it's a little more costly to set up. It's a little more cumbersome to administer after it's set up. But it also has what they call the double taxation problem, which is if the corporation earns a profit, the corporation has to pay income taxes on the profit. And if the corporation dividends any money to the owner, then the owner has to pay taxes on the dividends. So to avoid that, most entrepreneurs and small businesses elect a subchapter S with the IRS so that the corporation's profits are not paid by a corporate tax. They're put on the books or the tax returns of the owner, and you pay a personal income tax level, and that's what a subchapter S is. Now, again, these are the sorts of things, and setting these things up is easy. You can do it online. It costs a little bit of money. Everybody's got to get their pound of flesh. But once you've created the business, now you have to register it. And typically, that means completing some more forms, paying some more money to either the state or local establishments in order to get it registered. So most registrations for businesses are with the Secretary of State here in Illinois. Now, sole proprietor and partnerships, they do it at the county level. But you have to go through the process of registering your business, but you also need to determine whether or not you need a license for your business. Excuse me. Now, we think of lawyers, accountants, doctors as needing to be licensed. But in Illinois, you need to be licensed if you're an interior designer, if you're a nail technician, if you're an athletic trainer, you have to get a license. So you have to fill out an application. Typically, you have to pay a fee, and that's for the state of Illinois. Now, Chicago also has a list of license requirements. So you need to also search Chicago to see if there's any requirements for your business space. If you start a business in Aurora, Illinois, for example, they have no licenses, so you don't have to fill out another form or pay an extra fee. If you have employees now you have to worry about some other things, about labor laws, about OSHA, workman's comp, unemployment insurance, the immigration laws, so that you can certify citizenship and retain information about your employees. Well, you'll have to have a tax ID number for your business. If you have employees, you have to collect their tax ID numbers and also collect their money and pay the withholding taxes and other remunerations to the government. And if you have a retail tag on your product that has a barcode, you have to register your barcode as a company. So we've put together a list of most of the websites that you'll ever need and what the reasons are, including the barcode at the bottom. And as Stephen said, you'll get a copy of these slides later, but these are the places that you need to go in order to find out how to take that next step in your business. Now, you can get free or discounted legal advice from most of the law schools here in Chicago. They have programs to help startups, and there are second and third year law students that are being supervised by either corporate attorneys or by law professors. They're very good, and they can help establish your business. They can set it up. So Chicago, Kent, Northwestern, Loyola, they all have these programs, but you have to fill out an application to qualify. And I also recommend that you do it not in the summertime if possible, because there's just fewer law students that are available. So if you do it during the year, you have to fill out an application. If you get approved, then you can get some help from these programs to get you started. They can't be your attorneys after you get started, but they can get you started. You can also go to the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And there you can find actual attorneys that are doing pro bono work for corporations, particularly for startups. And so those are places where you can go to get some initial help for setting up your business. Now, most people think of LegalZoom, that's great, but you should also know that there are 4 other very credible options to LegalZone out there. And this is the example of those that you can go to get the documents that you need in order to start your business, complete the licensure and all of that. So every business owner really needs a set of advisors. You need a banker. Maybe you won't be able to borrow money to start with, but you'll need a banker to have your corporate checking account. You need a lawyer, just in case after your business starts, somebody wants to sue you or you need to fill out an application for something. You should have an accountant, an insurance agent, and a business mentor, perhaps, hopefully, somebody from SCORE. Now, you might not be able to get all these people together at once, but they're your sounding board. There's the people you go to get advice, to ask questions of. And so it's like dating. You've got to find the right mix. So if you're going for a banker, a lawyer, accountant, any of these people, you want them to have some experience in your space. You don't want to be a manufacturer that has a lawyer that does nothing but does legal work for online garment distributors. It doesn't work. So if you're going to be manufacturing organic dog food, you want someone that has some manufacturing experience, hopefully in the pet space, but somebody that understands the risk issues if you're an insurance agent, the legal issues if you're a lawyer. You want someone that has experience in your space, but you also want someone where you have the right chemistry. And therein lies some of the dilemma that you have, but you've got to go shopping. You need these players to be part of your advisory team. They should have experience in your space, if at all possible, and you should make sure that you've got the right kind of chemistry, that you can have very open, candid, and factual conversations with them. That's very important. Now, because you're a participant in this webinar today, you will be getting what we call at SCORE Chicago, the business process map. Now, this was developed uniquely in Chicago by a volunteer that takes you through virtually everything that you need to be thinking about to start a business. It's a 5-page flow chart, and it may appear very daunting to start with. But you should take a look at it because it provides a very great checklist of things that you should be thinking about. Now, not all of them will apply to you, so you can cross them off if they don't. But it's a great service because you are bound to be forgetting some things. And this is a great way to give you kind of an exhaustive list of all the things that you should be thinking about. And you'll get that as a follow-up. Now, if you're not subscribing to these 4 things, you should start. Now, Entrepreneur Magazine, we've talked about before, it costs money to subscribe, digitally or otherwise, and Inc. Magazine the same. Now, if you don't want to pay for the subscription, you can still go to their website and find a lot of information out about startups, your industry, problems you're looking for. The Startup Magazine and Startup Digest, those are free. And these are people that curate all sorts of startup articles and information, and then they send, based on your filling out the forms, they send you information by email on a regular basis that you can read and digest. And they're really great sources. So you should start, looking at these things right away. Years ago, you didn't have the help that is available today for startup assistance. So today, if you want help with e-commerce or building websites, there's lots of choices out there to help. Now, we usually think of Amazon as the place to go for e-commerce. that can be great, but it can also be very problematic. So if you have a store, Shopify is a great platform. Now they have over 100,000 online stores. They have all the bells and whistles you want, but it's not free. Now, if you want to build your own website, you can go to Squarespace, which is they have a lot of very good templates that give a lot of looks of sophistication to them. And they've got payment and shipping options all built in. It just doesn't have inventory management, but it's another place that you can go to get assistance to build your website and e-commerce options. Now, WooCommerce is a very beginner friendly, and it really has a large and growing market share. It's kind of interesting. There's really nothing complex about what they have. They've got built-in third-party payment options. And the best thing about it is they've got a free version that you can use for e-commerce. So it's something that you should check out. Now, Wix is best known as a website builder, but they also have an e-commerce platform that you can use. They're very feature-rich plans that they have. You should consider thinking about them. And Doric is kind of new to the scene. They've got an impressive list of templates for e-commerce. Although they're limited in number, they're very impressive in their use. And so if you're looking to get an e-commerce or website platform and you're on a budget, Doric is something that you should think about. Shipping and fulfillment. If you're able to fulfill your own orders, then you probably should think about using ShipStation or Shipping Easy as platforms to actually execute the shipping, doing the labeling and getting it out to the right places. Both of these companies are based in Austin, by the way. But if you don't want to do your own fulfillment, then these other three, ShipBob, ShipHero, and SaltBox, are platforms that will not only do the shipping, but they will also do the fulfillment for you. So ShipBob it's been around probably 10 years. They're not cheap. The fees are kind of high, but it's designed so that it's really hands off for you. They do basically everything, and that's what you're paying for. ShipHero basically is just in North America. They do the outsourcing for fulfillment, but if you want to do fulfillment, they will also rent you space in their business for you to do your own fulfillment, and then you can use them for shipping. SaltBox is a little different. They're the newest of these options. They also will rent you space, but it's really built for the business owner to be in charge. So it's kind of the flip side of ShipBob, where they want you to step out of the way and they're going to do it. SaltBox wants you to be an integral part, and that's why it's a lot more affordable. But the point of all of this is you should check into these platforms because they're there to help you fulfill your business. Again, for payments, we think of PayPal. The problem with PayPal is that it's very visible to your customers, and it might give them the impression that you're not big enough to have a direct relationship with a charge card company. That's what Stripe does. Stripe doesn't show up on your website. They just show the charge cards, and they let the customer believe that you have a direct relationship with American Express, for example. So Stripe is a great option. Square, of course, is that little thing you put on your phone that you can actually have a payment done face-to-face. Slack is great for inter-office messaging and sharing files amongst employees. HubSpot is a little more costly, but they help integrate all of your social media platforms so they're all speaking the same language. ManageHub allows your employees to develop operating procedures and share them amongst each other. And Gusto is a payroll and HR related platform. Again, these are platforms that assist in parts of the business that you may need assistance in. They're out there and you should discover what they have to offer. These websites, you should bookmark them because they are great for finding information about your startup situation. So you can find lots of articles. You can search all the things that they publish to find things that are very particular to your interest. But these are great places to go for information. You should start exploring some of those tonight. Let me describe what this is. An incubator is a hatch, right? Incubator, you hatch an egg. So incubators help you launch a business. So these are the most prominent Chicago incubators today. And these are where you converge with a group of people, sometimes 10 or 20 entrepreneurs get together in a shared location managed by the incubator. There's no set time frame. Sometimes, depending on the incubator, the average time that you're in with these people is maybe 30 months or more. So you get access to all sorts of entrepreneurs, to CEOs that have been successful, to mentors, to investors. You get a lot of coaching to be able to launch your business. Accelerators are different in that you've got an existing business, and what you want to do is you want to accelerate it to the next level. So these are the most prominent Chicago accelerators. Not that you'll need them anytime soon, but it's something to have in the back of your mind. It's a much different perspective because they get a group of people together that they call a cohort for a very limited period of time. It's, 3 to 5 months. And then they're intensely getting you to work on your business, to really get to the next level. They will probably provide some minority seed money, but they give you access to mentors, investors, and successful CEOs for counseling and assistance, help you solve problems, overcome obstacles, and then you graduate together and you're gone. So to get into these, it's best if you can network into them as opposed to just filling out an application, which you can do. But you can go to an incubator, for example, or an accelerator and find out who they're working with. They'll list the companies that they're working with because they're proud of that. And maybe you know someone who's in that company who is part of the Chicago incubator of, Chicago Fashion Incubator. And you can use LinkedIn or some other way to network through that person to get an introduction to that incubator. But networking in is the best place to go. I'm going to end with this quote. Sometimes life is going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose face. Now, this quote was from a guy that many call a genius. They call him a visionary. Some call him a taskmaster. He's been compared to Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Walt Disney. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs ever. And he truly knows the journey that you're going to be going through. And this is his quote. Steve Jobs, he made this statement, co-founder of Apple. Now, there's no doubt that the pandemic poured fuel on the fire of entrepreneurship across the United States. So the Census Bureau reported that through July of 2023, there were 3.1 million new business applications that were submitted, which was the most of any year but one in the last 10. So actually, new startups in 2021 were 35% higher than pre-pandemic era. Well, this might be a little better graph because you can see that spike in 2021 here, where it's really pronounced after the pandemic. But the other thing you should notice is that going forward, the level of new businesses are far in excess of what they were in the last 20 years. So entrepreneurship is big in the United States. It's growing. It's very robust. And your time is now to join it. Now, the purpose we had today, we were supposed to learn a lot more about how to start your business. I know we covered a lot of material, mile wide and inch deep, and I hope we accomplished something today. If nothing else, I hope I got you to think. Now, all of you will get a copy of the slide deck and a copy of that process map afterwards. But I'm prepared to stay and answer questions. And I want to again thank you for listening.
Okay, we do have some questions. I currently run a chamber, but I would like to renew my LLC. I activated this consulting boutique 14 years ago. How do I manage conflict of interest?
I'm not sure what the context is for conflict of interest. So it's hard for me to answer that question. I apologize.
Can you share the info again about the SCORE webinar for analyzing your competition?
Sure. If you go to score.org, go to the search box and enter analyze your competition. Press search and that webinar will come up. And then you can register for the webinar, take it whenever you want, it's free. And it will give you the structure on how to assemble your information to produce a SWOT analysis.
I completed my business plan. However, I need more guidance and mentorship on the next steps and lender options in the process.
Well, then I would strongly urge you to go to SCORE Chicago and to make an arrangement to meet with a mentor. It's free and confidential. And your first meeting is to try to see, do you have the right resource there? Do you got good chemistry? If there's something very specific you want, they will be able to go into SCORE nationally and find resources that can converge on a very specific issue that you may have. But I would strongly urge you to go to SCORE Chicago and set up a time to meet with a mentor for the first time.
What are your thoughts on nonprofit business?
I get asked this a lot, but I have no experience with nonprofit organizations, even though I volunteer for a few of them. I mean, I really don't know much about the dynamics for the nonprofits other than, there's a lot of fundraising issues that are really very specific to nonprofits that are not part of, normal corporate America. But I really don't have much information on not-for-profits. I apologize.
Just more information and questions about SCORE. Is there a POC or just go to the website and find a mentor?
Yeah, you go to the website and you can find a mentor and set up an appointment. They have a number of different locations around Chicago, so depending on where you would like to meet, that sometimes is another option that you have. But you'll be able to go to SCORE Chicago and .org and find a mentor and set up an appointment.
We still have a few minutes, so please put your questions in the chat box. You are receiving a lot of thank yous.
You're welcome.
How can we gain exposure to lenders in the application?
You really, there is another webinar that I put on. Actually, the BACP will be sponsoring it later on this year. It's called Funding Your Startup. And I put that on, and so you'll get a lot more information about that. But you should know that banks rarely finance a startup. And when I say startup, I mean a real startup. We hear the term startup for companies that have been in existence for 5 to 7 years. And those companies, while newer, are well past the startup phase. They've launched and they've succeeded. So most businesses, before they break even, will not be able to get financed by a bank. That said, you want to create a relationship with a banker with the prospect that they may be able to lend you money later. And that's where you can share your business plan with them. There's no pressure to get a yes answer for a loan. Bankers are always being asked by their boss, what prospects have you surfaced in the last week or the last month? So they're always looking for people that they can say, I've got a new prospect. So being able to talk with a banker about potentially new business is an easy thing to do. And starting that relationship early on is a great way to position yourself for potential lending at some future date.
Someone just offered some information regarding startups being financed, saying that Hutchinson Bank local program got them approved for an SBA loan as a brand new business for as much as $150,000.
It does happen. I didn't say it never. It does happen, but you should know that very few banks are lending money to businesses that have not broken even.
They want to know, how do they get in touch with you?
You can email me at jeffrey.nicholson@scorevolunteer.org.
We have 1 more minute for questions.
Sure,
Put them in the chat box.
you bet.
All right, Mr. Nixon, do you have any last words of encouragement?
No, I wish you all the very best. This is a great time for starting a business. The stars are aligned. There's lots of resources out there. SCORE and BACP are here to help you out, and take advantage of that. And you can be part of that 2 out of 5.
Thank you, and thank you to our attendees today. If you are a part of the Entrepreneur Certificate Program, your account will automatically reflect your attendance today within 24 hours. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/BACP webinars. Again, that's chicago.gov/BACP webinars. To join our entrepreneurship program, please visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Again, that's chicago.gov/BACP certificate. This webinar today was recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. Thank you again to Mr. Nicholson, and have a great day.
Good luck.